Servus Männer, it's Red Pill Germany again. I want to inform you on the recent state of affairs in Germany, but more particularly in Bavaria. As you all know, probably from my previous videos, the lockdown or lockdown light in Germany will be in effect from next Monday. Angela Merkel met with the governors of our federal states and they decided on this lockdown. Now it is the job of the governments of the federal states to formulate regulations and decrees that will reflect these negotiations or this compromise that was reached there in that meeting. Mr. Söder from Bavaria already said that he wants to implement this compromise one by one. But as always, he will of course implement rules and formulate decrees that go beyond what the others have decided on. That has been his strategy. That is the way he wants to position himself from the very beginning. He wants to be Mr. Extra strict, and whatever the others do, he has to one-up them every time. And in my opinion, he went full totalitarian this time. We all heard what he said and most people understood it in that way, which is in my opinion the only way this can be understood. He called on the people of Bavaria to spy on their neighbors and to call the police and to inform the authorities about neighbors breaking the rules. And that is of course great in a situation like that, where the nation is divided as it is about how to deal with this disease. There are people who are very much afraid of it and who take it super seriously. And then on the other hand, there are people that say that it outright doesn't exist or it's a hoax. And then there are also people who say, well, it does exist, but it is not worse than a seasonal influenza according to the official numbers. And I'm one of these people. And in times like these, where the people are at each other's throat, the government is talking about solidarity and standing together as one, while they are calling on the people to spy on their neighbors. And in this video, I want to investigate and to clarify this in more detail. But before I go into those details, I want to thank my supporters and my subscribers once again. If you like this material, like, share and subscribe and activate the bell for notifications. If you like to support my work, you can do so directly via PayPal or via Patreon or Subscribestar. Links in the description down below. Alright, so before we can look at what Mr. Söder really said, I should tell you what the regulations are in Bavaria right now. As you know from my previous videos, there is this 2-household rule in Germany and the 10-people rule. That means only up to 10 people and only from 2 different households. Not more, not 3, not 4. Only members of up to 2 different households are allowed to meet in public. In Bavaria, however, Mr. Söder extended this rule also to include private settings. That means people's private houses and their private apartments. And that begs, of course, the obvious question how this rule should be enforced. Mr. Söder said that the authorities, the police, will of course enforce this too. But then again, how? Is the police now searching all Bavarian apartments? So now let's look at what he said in detail. Of course, Bavarian police cannot check every apartment. So Mr. Söder said, there will not be police patrolling and ringing on every doorbell. And then he said, if some citizens were to complain about their neighbors, then we will react to that. And then we will send officers to that apartment who make sure that those guests leave, or we will tell them. But I think they will do more than tell them because it is a regulation in Bavaria. And then he added, this is the same procedure as in the case of a public disturbance. And by that I mean if someone has a loud party or after hours, let's say 1 in the morning, and it is a party with loud booming music and the neighbors want to sleep because they have to work the next day. In that case also the neighbors can call the police and the police will come, they will ring the doorbell and they will tell them to keep it down. And we have of course regulations and laws about an acceptable or tolerable noise level at a certain time of the day. You cannot just have loud music on in the middle of the night when your neighbors want to sleep. I think everybody understands that. And in the same way, Mr. Söder wants to treat now this case that somebody has 2 or 3 guests in his apartment, even though they're not disturbing anybody. What is disturbing here is that he's directly asking the citizens of Bavaria to report their neighbors to the authority, because of course he wants that. He did not pass this regulation because he's indifferent about it. He wants this regulation to be enforced. He said it is very important. And he said that right now in Germany, it is unacceptable that larger groups of people meet. Unacceptable. That is the word he used. So of course he wants that rule to be enforced, and it takes a complaining neighbor to enforce this rule. So yes, he wants people to spy on their neighbors and then to report them to the authorities. Otherwise, he wouldn't have passed that regulation. So, but in this case, we have a federal law that is in effect since 2001. It is called the Infektionsschutzgesetz. It means infection protection law. And that law states that basic rights and liberties can be violated if it serves the purpose of fighting an infection or some kind of dangerous disease. And these regulations that are passed now are basically implementing that. And just like the police can force you to keep down the volume when you have a party in your apartment, they can now enforce the regulation about the number of people from different households that are in an apartment. So the scary thing is that legally this is watertight, I guess. It is just really scary that a governor of a German state is calling on people to spy on their neighbors. The question is then, of course, for how long do we tolerate these measures, and is this really such a super dangerous disease? Also, Mr. Söder announced that he wants to declare a state of emergency for Bavaria, which makes it, of course, much easier to violate fundamental constitutional rights when you can just declare a state of emergency. And I am not the only person who understood it that way. A lot of people and a lot of news outlets also interpreted his words in exactly that way. And then there was the far leftist, or should I even say communist newspaper of Munich, the Süddeutsche Zeitung, that was running interference for Mr. Söder from the CSU. And I think I have never seen that before. This far left newspaper came out and said, well, he never said that, that's a misrepresentation. Technically, he didn't say that. And this is what these leftists always resort to, sophistry and twisting words. Yes, he did not say, I want every Bavarian citizen to spy on his neighbor. He didn't say that, of course. But as I said, this regulation is only enforceable if a person complains about their neighbor. So of course he wants that. And he made that clear with his words in not very subtle terms. Given the context, this is exactly what he said. This is exactly what he meant. But isn't it curious that a newspaper that fought against the CSU for decades is all of a sudden running interference for Mr. Söder, the CSU governor? So if anybody still has some illusions about the left and the right in Germany, and by that I mean the center-right cucks and the Social Democrat Green Party left, if you really think that they are somehow opponents, you have another thing coming. They are one and the same political force in Germany. They are a globalist establishment, and all their little skirmishes in the political arena are only a diversion for the masses. This is a full-on democracy simulation in which we live. So this is another mask that has dropped. We finally see that the center left and the center right are in the end one and the same group. They are just playing good and bad cop, and the roles are of course reversed when you look at the whole game from the other perspective. What is the good cop for the quote-unquote right is the bad cop for the quote-unquote left, and vice versa. So this afternoon I talked to a couple of people. They all live in Bavaria, and none of them would have believed just 1 year ago that our governor here would sink to such a level and embrace totalitarianism and even ask Bavarians to spy on their neighbors, only to talk about solidarity and standing together as one just in the next sentence almost. In my opinion, that just goes to show, while there are dangerous groups on the extremes of the political wings on the left and the right, the real danger does not come from the far left or from the far right, but from the top. And by that I mean globalism. Globalist ideologues are the real danger for our people and for our families. And that is not only true for Bavaria, but for all people with European heritage. Let me know what you think about that and how things are going in your country at the moment. I am fully aware that compared to other countries, the measures that were enacted in Germany are probably rather mild in some cases. But that doesn't make it better in my opinion, and I wanted to inform you guys what is going on here. And I think it is really relevant because Mr. Söder might actually be the next Chancellor of Germany. Who knows? Take care. Servus, Kameraden.